Sexual abuse is a dis-ease. Roughly 25% of the population participates on one side or the other of abusing and being abused. The numbers are higher depending on how we define abuse. And a lot of abuse is under the radar of ignorance. Meaning, if you don't know how to drive a car, and you don't know that you don't know how to drive a car, you can abuse the car in the sense of taking tens of thousands of miles of possible life out of that car, not changing certain oils, etc., and not know it, because you don't know what you don't know. And if we look at dis-ease in its technical term, the unnecessary suffering, the unnecessary friction that destroys that which is engaging in the dis-ease, in the pattern of behavior that leads to unnecessary destruction. If we look at dis-ease in that technical sense, and we understand that it's an intergenerational virus. Now, a virus just means that it's replicated relatively intact in a fractal pattern of abuse. That continues. It's very common for sexual abusers to have been sexually abused. Not always in the most physical and technical sense, meaning it's not uncommon for emotional sexual abuse and incest to migrate into physical sexual abuse and incest. And it's not uncommon for physical sexual abuse and incest to migrate into emotional and mental sexual abuse and incest. But the first form of abuse, and again, if we look at the technical term, the absence of good use. To abuse a car is to drive it with more than it can carry at higher speeds than it can safely travel, at a higher, increasing the risks of fatalities and accidents, and to maintain it in a way that it's going to collapse, deteriorate, and need to be trashed much earlier than a well-maintained, a well-used car. So you have ease and dis-ease, you have abuse, and you have good maintenance, good practices, and good use. When you've got best practices, you have a long, sustainable life with minimal unnecessary suffering and high degrees of value. So anything that's a continuum, it's a gradient, and anything that detracts from that continuum is closer to abuse and further away from good use. And you'll see that again in the automotive analogy, where something can have major breakdowns at 25,000 miles that are easily preventable. The smoke coming out, it's making noises. The whole thing has to be junked and started over again. You can take the same vehicle and follow best practices and get it to extend beyond its normal lifespan, by hundreds of percent, and get hundreds of thousands of miles out of this basic car. And the first area of abuse comes in systemic illiteracy in what is and is not abuse. So, as a 46-year-old American male, there is not a single person that has either recommended a book, recommended a documentary, recommended an article about what is and is not sexual abuse and why, and there's not a single therapist among dozens of practitioners, or parent, or teacher, or government, meaning there's absolutely no one in the history of my lifespan who explained what is and is not sexual abuse and why. So we could say that we are illiterate in the domain of understanding sexual abuse out of the commitment, the willful ignorance of an entire cult, that there's no bringing of this information. Now, I do know how flus work. You know, wear a scarf, wear a jacket, don't do this, don't do that. Here's the problem if you get the flu. Here's the contagion factor. You know, all of that's important to avoid disseminating the flu indefinitely. And that contagion part is a really important part of that data. In other words, if you've been traumatically sexually abused, you have a far higher chance of infecting other people with that pattern. Not because you were born bad or innately anything, but because viruses that have not been healed have a tendency to spread virally. That's their nature. So a lack of data systemically is the first form of abuse. So it's abusive of parents not to share this data systemically. It is an abuse of the school system. It is an abuse of the government. It is an abuse of therapists. So, I mean, that should cover it. This is a very important thing to be aware of given the high infection rates in our culture. You know, as part of that data, you know, we all pretty much hear that sexual abuse is bad, but we don't get an accurate description of what it is and why this is or is not abuse. Now, I think most, at least grown-ups, at least they grasp that it's against the law. But is it clear to you why a 25-year-old having sex with a 14-year-old is sexual abuse? Is it clear why that might harm a 14-year-old? What if the 14-year-old initiates it? And what if the 14-year-old feels abandoned and rejected if her love doesn't say yes? I mean, we are profoundly illiterate in this domain. We lack data. Now, you know, if we were still spreading the AIDS virus with zero awareness that it was alive and well in the culture, and zero understanding of how dangerous it was, and no understanding of how exactly it was contagious, you know, how it was passed on, or what the statistics of viral transmission were, or what habits created the most impact, we would be colluding in a cult of ignorance about the dissemination of AIDS. We are doing that around sex. So there's a lack of data. I mean, just knowing that 1 in 4 people or more, because America tends to have a long history of denying its shadow, have participated in abusing someone, maybe without knowing what the line was, maybe with knowing what the line was, maybe doing exactly what was done to them in a way that was covered up, minimized, etc. Because when you've been abused and it's been called love, and then it's been covered up, and then it's taboo to talk about, how are you going to untangle that so that you don't love someone else? It's harder. So we have the lack of general data, we have the lack of description. You don't even know if you're infected or not because you don't know exactly what it is and what the severity range of symptoms are. Now, this leads naturally to the next form of cult abuse, which is lack of preparation. Now, if you knew that there was a 1 in 4 chance that you'd get AIDS, and AIDS could be fatal, you might prepare. Use a condom, do this, and note these symptoms, and then when you get AIDS, you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and your odds of survival go up. Again, I haven't received from a therapist, a teacher, a parent, a friend, or a lover a single sentence recommending a book, a place to learn. How do you prepare? Because particularly in traumatic sexual abuse, you're dissociative, you're disoriented. It's not the time you can come up with a plan. So why is it in our cult that every single person does not have a plan for their 25% statistic when they're going to abuse someone or be abused by someone? Why isn't that plan in place? We have jacks in the car because in a given couple of years, there may be a 25% chance your tire will go flat. Do you know what to do? Call AAA, get out the jack, get out the spare tire, and you have an instruction book that's waiting. Oh, let's look at the instruction book. Where's the instruction book about what to do when you're sexually abused by your priest? When you're sexually abused by a nun, when you're sexually abused by the 12% of therapists who admit to sexually abusing their patients in blind surveys, when you're sexually abused by a parent, when you're sexually abused by a spouse or other family member. Where's your manual? Here's what you do when you are sexually abused. Now, how bad can it get if you have to wait for someone to help you change a tire? You might lose an hour. Hey, I don't know what I'm doing. I need to change a tire. You'll get some help. Maybe you'll figure it out. It's not that complicated. But how bad can it get when you're being sexually abused by an authority figure that in a way that you don't know if it is or isn't abuse, because most abusers call it love. You don't know if it is or isn't abuse, and you have no idea what to do about it. And you don't realize that this, unlike a spare tire, could actually be affecting decades of your life. You don't know any of that because you're in a sexually illiterate, psychologically illiterate, traumatically illiterate cult with a conspiracy of silence. I mean, it's not just that this isn't forwarded to many people. It's the discomfort of the grown-ups, I won't say adults, but the grown-ups around you when you bring up topics around sex or abuse or trauma, spiritual abuse, abuse by the clergy, abuse by power figures. It's the discomfort of the little children in grown bodies that feel paralyzed, that feel nervous, that let the child, the adolescent, the grown-up know that we don't want to talk about this. We're not going to give you the data, and we don't want to talk about this. It's incredibly insane. If we did that with the flu or with AIDS, we'd all be sick all the time for no good reason, because it's incompetent. Now, this is not personal, which is how the abuse compounds massively after it occurs. Meaning it's not personal that I'm able to get to age 40 knowing absolutely nothing in this cult from all sources. That's average, which means that once I become infected with the disease, hopefully not physical as well, but certainly psychological, of sexual abuse, if I tell you about it, you have absolutely no idea what to do. In other words, if I share with you, hey, I was sexually abused by my priest, and you know absolutely nothing about it, in a cult that shames you for not knowing, meaning we think it's really wonderful in our cult to know stuff, and we think it's embarrassing not to know something. So if I point out to you that you don't know something, and that you don't know something, and as a result of that you're incompetent to respond effectively in this situation, you're not going to respond neutrally as a healthy, ignorant person might do, because you've been shamed in the area of ignorance. Your teacher at school, when you didn't know something, ridiculed you in front of the class, traumatized you, shamed you repeatedly for not knowing something. In other words, it's a crime not to know. We're not going to teach you what sexual abuse is, how to prevent it, how to respond to it. But we are going to teach you that not knowing is shameful. And then we're going to put sexual abuse survivors in the position of having to alert the people around them that you don't know, and you don't know that you don't know. And because you don't know and you don't know that you don't know, you're incompetent. Which creates a defense, not against ignorance, that's the truth. You don't know because your cult hasn't told you. Nothing shameful about it. It's common sense. How could you possibly know in a cult where everyone gets anxious when you start discussing the truth? So of course you don't know, but you're still carrying the shame that you don't know in a cult that shames children for not knowing. You know, the child that raises a hand and asks a question and everyone laughs. Why? Because they didn't know. Well, what else is the point of raising a hand? So each of these dysfunctions, meaning that is a disease, shaming ignorance in a statistical reality where 99.9999% of everything there is to know is not known, not just by you, but by everything, by everyone. The universe is big, and we know less than 1% of 1% of 1% of all there is to know. Do you know the distance between star A6235 and star A6237? Of course you don't. Many of these things, not a single person on the planet knows or has ever known these things. But even on this planet alone, we are profoundly ignorant. What are the distinctions, positive and negative, about different religions? Bigots don't know that. They just know that the other people's ideas are bad. We don't know very much about anything, which is one form and source of dis-ease, But then we compound it by shaming anyone who admits the absolute obvious truth. Now, this gets so severe that when I would raise my hand in school and ask the teacher things that the teacher didn't know, you see, the teacher had been shamed as a child in this cult as well. So having identified that they didn't know something and having humiliated their students for not knowing something, the teacher felt humiliated and then felt enraged at me as if somehow I had set out to humiliate him. So he flew into a rage. So it's not okay not to know, and it's not okay to tell and point out to the teacher that they don't know. But now a sexual abuse survivor has to point out to a shame-based person that they don't know and deal with the defensiveness and shame of that person who has no idea what it's like to be a sexual abuse survivor. They have an idea of what it's like to be shamed for not knowing. So that disease gets dumped on top of all the ignorance and incompetence at on the sexual abuse survivor. It's another burden. Now, these are burdens that the American psyche is ill-equipped to deal with. Meaning a shame-based person is ill-equipped to deal with how little they know and how little they know about how little they know. Because they're shamed for that. It's too heavy. The shame that has been piled on in high school is too heavy to carry, along with all the other different burdens and diseases we give our people as a cult. You know, when you see these Chevettes driving out of Home Depot with half a pallet of bricks in them, you know, smoking engine, front wheels half lifting off, those cars are being run into the ground. The structure, the identity of a sexual abuse survivor. Now, by the way, sexual abuse, and this is another thing that you don't know, and you don't know that you don't know, is far more damaging in males than it is in females. Meaning, the symptoms of dis-ease by young boys sexually abused by older men are much higher than the symptoms of disease of older women sexually abusing young girls. Now, I don't know the statistics. I mean, what else is new? I have no idea. After proactive study in this field, I still don't know whether an older woman sexually abusing a younger male has more or less damaging impact than an older male sexually abusing a younger girl. I do know that most of the sexual abuse of young boys is from older men, and that is much harder on the young male homophobic psyche than the, admittedly devastating results of older men sexually abusing young girls. And this is borne out in the crime statistics, meaning we don't study anything relevant like this. It's only one of the most horrifying things that our children have to deal with. Why would we, fill our minds with this data and respond to it? But one of the interesting correlations is we in this country put primarily young men, we put children under the age of 18 to death if they express enough hostility to warrant the death penalty. So we kill children who act out. Now, if we look at the statistical correlation of the children who act out, the most violent, extreme offenses by young boys are committed by young boys who have been sexually abused by older men. Now, we know from psychology that you can't externalize something you haven't internalized. In other words, you cannot behave cruelly, hostilely, sociopathically, enraged, etc., if that is not part of your experience. In other words, it is an intelligent place to look. What has decimated the innocence of these young boys? What has left them feeling completely helpless, completely alone, completely betrayed, hating themselves, and then eventually hating the world that did this to them? What is it that have filled innocent children with hate, with rage, with trauma, and with violence? And while we cannot be bothered to do that research as a cult committed to willful ignorance, we do have a surprisingly high statistic of the young boys on death row who report being repeatedly sexually abused by older men. So it's probably pretty hard on them in a homophobic, emotionally illiterate, chauvinistic cult in which boys are shamed for talking about their feelings, to hit their emotional body hard with betrayal, violation, confusion, and sexual abuse by an older, bigger man. It's probably pretty hard on the male psyche. We know that children internalize all of the faults of their parents. That when a parent is cruel, the 5-year-old doesn't look at the parent and say, "You are a motherfucking asshole. There's nothing wrong with me. You're a fucked up sociopath. Get out of my life." Now, in a dependent relationship, the child looks at the cruelty and the grown-up giant around them and asks themselves why they're so unlovable. That's how psychology works. We also know that identity leads to consistency, meaning once you decide that you are a horrible, ugly, unlovable piece of shit, and that's who you are fundamentally, you now have to ask and act like a horrible, worthless piece of shit. Otherwise, you will go crazy. Because if you are a horrible piece of shit and you act angelically, you are insane. Because you say, how is it that I'm so horrible? We've established that. That's the reason I was abused. And yet I'm being so nice. The brain can't process it. Once a child takes on the inadequacy and incompetence of their cult, they will stay sane by behaving consistent with the messages they've received, i.e., horribly, abusively, sociopathically. Which is one reason it's not a good idea in an intelligent cult to abuse young children. They will take it on, identify with it, and then hurt other people in a similar way until that disease is healed, in a cult where the healing is sporadic and largely incompetent. So there's no cultural sensitivity when I say, I'm at my wit's end, I'm in massive amounts of pain, I'm in overwhelm, and I have no idea what's going on and what needs to happen because I've got no training and no preparation. I don't even know if this is sexual abuse. Please help me. The sociopathic, shame-based, ignorant American is going to go to the police. This isn't my problem. I don't have time for this. That's not an intelligent, competent, empathic response. But it is the response that our sexual abuse survivors get in this cult. I've been getting that response by more than 1,000 Americans. It's an insane response that a sexual abuse survivor doesn't need to get because it elevates the fear, the trauma, and movement towards PTSD. Why? Because you realize that whatever it is that I don't know how to respond and deal with, I'm in a cult where other people don't know how to respond to it either. In other words, I'm on my own. The second or another wave of abuse. The realization of being alone because no one is competent to help. Now, this is one of the biggest forms of abuse, and it is systemic, meaning it has nothing to do with the perpetrator. If there were the odd perpetrator and there were competent, empathic human beings who knew how to respond to sexual abuse, it would have very little impact. You'd have your training. You'd say, oh, there's a sick person. Means absolutely nothing about my future or anything else. Good, I didn't contract AIDS from the experience. This is an ignorant, shame-based person who's a remnant from when we used to be a sociopathic cult that did this to children. And I can report them, and they can get medical attention, and I can receive extra help and be congratulated on how well I handled the situation. The bruises in my body can heal in a couple of days, and I got through that one well. What's next? You've got resilience. Instead of saying, I don't know how to deal with this on my own, I feel completely crazy. I don't know how to protect other victims. I don't know how to avoid being attacked. And everyone I talk to doesn't want to talk to me because in doing so, they reveal their profound participation in systemic ignorance that is inadequate as a response. You, statistically speaking, are profoundly inadequate to respond to a sexual abuse survivor. And it's not your fault that you're in this state, but you could do something about it. You could actually read a book, watch a documentary, read The Body Keeps the Score. You could do that. But do you care enough about yourself and others to do so in a cult that has given you tens of thousands of messages that the feminine sphere in men and women is low ranking? And we're talking about feelings here. Or are you, chauvinist as you're born and bred, going to go watch a CNBC interview about Microsoft stock as really important, while your daughter gets sexually abused and you haven't a clue how to respond because you're so ignorant you don't know that you're ignorant, and you shame your child rather than admit that inadequacy. So this is one of the most devastating aspects of the abuse. No one knows how to respond. It's big. Now, the next area of abuse comes in the cross-wiring of love. Now, most abusers, obviously the children that we could convince are evil, as you know, we're hitting you because you're bad, we're throwing you out of school because you're stupid, you're worthless, you're a piece of garbage, and we're going to act that out 10,000 ways till you get the message, and now you're going to behave as if you're worthless and a piece of garbage, surprise, surprise, and then we're going to execute you because we're cowards. We don't like admitting that we don't know how to raise children. We don't even give parents a competency test, but we don't want to admit that. Let's kill the child instead and pretend that this is justice. How big do you need to feel, Judge, to bring down the full weight of public money to execute a traumatically abused child? Sleep well at night? That kind of sociopath abuses their own children. Will you execute them? It's outrageous. And it's outrageous that outrageousness, we're so dumb we don't know that we're dumb. And dumb is nothing to be ashamed of. We're dumb because we refuse to teach ourselves and other people. Instead, we're addicted to 6-hour cell phone interactions on a daily basis, which manages to skirt most of the pink elephants in the room. The cross-wiring of love has profound effects because sociopathic, abusive parents, uncles, older men, older women, nuns, priests, don't tell children or partners, I raped you because I feel helpless, because I feel lonely in an emotionally illiterate cult, and I have no idea how to respond to that feeling, and you look like you would take it. I mean, that's the truth. But they don't say that. Instead, they say, I love you. This is for you. So the cross-wiring of love with abuse is profound because you're in a psychologically illiterate cult, so no one's going to unwire that. No one's going to say, let's have a list of all the cross-wiring that happened, and these are the actual definitions. This is what adult love looks like. Loving enough to care, caring enough to see, seeing enough to understand, understanding enough to empathize, empathizing enough to attune, attuning enough to succeed at participating in your survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, the development of your gifts, the bringing of those gifts into the world, and the becoming part of something bigger than the limited self, something transcendent. That's what love is. Is the person who loves you helping with your survival or weakening it? The person who gives you AIDS isn't helping your survival. The person who shames you into depression is not helping with your survival. Depressed people survive less. The person who's always threatening this and that and the other is not helping you with survival and security. The person who does not know what you feel is not making your feelings feel loved and that they belong. The person who hasn't taken the time to understand what your values are, not what theirs are, or their parents are, but what your values are, and then helps you live your ideal, is not being loving. They're ramming their values and blame and judgment down your throat. They're not helping your self-esteem. They're shredding it. The person who says, come out and party and drink with me, don't worry about developing your gifts or becoming competent in the world, is not helping you grow. They're using you as an escape. The person who undermines and says you've got no hope of bringing your gifts in the world, just give up on them, is not giving you adult love. We don't even know what it means. That's abuse. When love is the single most powerful algorithm, meaning if the entire planet just deleted the program or closed it out, called the reptilian brain, of fight what is smaller than you, run from what's bigger than you, and freeze when neither of those two things will keep you alive, and lie like hell to escape being punished because you're in a shame-based cult. That program creates trillions upon trillions of units of chronic, unnecessary suffering. Adult love is a program. I love myself enough to care. I care about myself enough to take time. It takes time to see. I take enough time to see. I see enough to understand. I do that to myself and become a self-actualized human being, and then do that for someone else. This program reduces unnecessary suffering and dramatically increases yields of sustainable well-being. So, of course, we know nothing about it. We don't know what adult love is. We know all about pain, fear, betrayal, insanity, and schizophrenia because we see it all around all the time. Cross-wiring love, our little secret, you're such a cutie pie, is a fatal disease because for that moment on, every time someone says, I love you, your body contracts as if you're about to be killed, because rape isn't love. But you were told to cross-wire that word by someone who was too dumb to know that they were dumb. Nothing wrong with that in an innate sense. That's our cult. Or someone who was so sociopathic that they knew exactly how much they were fucking you up and enjoyed it. It takes fucking someone up pretty deep before they enjoy fucking up other people. But we manage to do that as a cult on a regular basis. So we have large amounts of sadistic people who experience the overwhelming cruelty of being systematically tormented by an older power figure and unable to escape the helplessness and unable to receive any help, have decided to infect as many people as possible with the viruses they're carrying, given to them by a psychologically illiterate cult of giants that prey on little children. Cross-wiring love is a major thing because from that moment on, when you move towards love, you move towards abuse, and you don't know the difference. It's a pretty big wound. Now, prioritizing the older person or the authority figure is another form of abuse, another layer of the wound. Now, why might you do this? Well, we raise children and adolescents in grown bodies. A child has never gotten enough attention, enough love, etc. An adolescent has never felt important enough. And now we give them the power to employ people, to have children, to run a government. And they try and use that power, corrupting the stated mission in order to get their needs met that never got met in their family. So you're a cute new intern. Oh, I wonder if I couldn't get you to look at me in college. But now I've got you on, you want a job? Okay, you're going to have to suck my dick. You see, and now why do you prioritize the older person? Because they're not feeding you. It's not the parent nurturing the child. It's the parent in pain and scarcity feeding on their children. It's not the boss nurturing and growing their employees. It's the boss feeding on the lifeblood of their employees. In a sociopathic power struggle to stay on top out of fear, not out of love or competency. And so you have this sociopathic dynamic where in order to get ahead, you've got to ass lick the alligator at the top of the power structure. You got to make mom feel good so she doesn't hit you as much as the sibling who points out that she's a son of a bitch. Oh, Mom, it wasn't that bad. I'm sure we deserve to be hit. Okay, I'm not going to hit you as much. I'll hit your brother who's pointing out the obvious, that I don't know what I'm doing as a parent in a cult that enables parentally illiterate children to become parents. So we then have shaming the victim. As all these layers of disease pile up, eventually they start showing symptoms: dissociation, numbness, depression, trauma. Well, anyone with half a brain does not expect a Chevette loaded down with a half pallet of bricks from Home Depot to win the race. But having loaded down our children, our adolescents, our partner with a half ton of shame and stupidity, we then stand on the sideline and say, no, you didn't make the cut. So-and-so, who wasn't abused as much as you, or who has the better coping strategy of enabling their abuser or whatever it is, they made the cut. What's wrong with you? We shame the victim demonstrating symptoms of sustained abuse. An abused person is terrified and irritable. Oh, what a crabby person. There's nothing wrong with us being so incompetent and unsafe that an abuse survivor can't even get any help from us. No, there's nothing wrong with that, but aren't they crabby? Let's not invite them to the party. So then we have the next wave of abuse, which is isolation, which is a shame and a trauma. When you isolate a human being in a state of need, every sexual abuse survivor is in a state of need for love and support and repair and sanity and you name it. When you isolate an abuse survivor, you're giving them the message that they may not survive because we're a social interdependent species, and if you're isolated just for existing in an event that you cannot stop, meaning just because you're surrounded by morons who are so incompetent they don't realize they're incompetent does not mean that you can delete the biological trauma around sexual abuse, shame, and the like. You can't. So if you're going to be punished for being who you are, and you can't stop being who you are, you've effectively got sociopaths ganging up to re-traumatize you with the message that you're not welcome in your survival, your love and belonging, your external validation is plummeting at the very moment it needs to be raising to stop the trauma becoming PTSD. Another wave of abuse. We also shame the victim, particularly in power dynamics with parents or, I'm watching a biography of nuns right now, and upon hearing about a nun sexually abusing their children, the priest appeals to the father not to make a scene because it would be bad for the clergy. So, in this dynamic, the sexual predator and all of their inadequacy is transferred to the whistleblower or the child. And they say, wouldn't you like a nice lollipop? We'll get you a good place at school. You wouldn't want to cause trouble. In other words, it's fine that nuns and priests and parents and uncles and therapists sexually abuse their patients, their clients, their children. It's just fine. But do you really want to destroy us? The Catholic Church, the great Human Awareness Institute, these loving parents, do you want to be responsible for ruining the reputation of this nice person who just made a few mistakes? Well, any person with a little common sense would say, I don't actually think the sexually abused therapeutic client did ruin your career or your marriage or your life. I don't think the person who did what their parents said and went to Catholic school actually ruined this priest's or this nun's life. I think the priest, betraying their vow of chastity, breaking the law to have sex with children, breaking the law again to not, or breaking their priesthood law again not to confess, and then shaming the person they abused by covering it up, I think they ruined their career. Not the child, not the therapeutic patient. But this is the next wave of abuse, to hold the victim, which has been given the inappropriate power through sustained stupidity and violation on the part of the therapist, the priest, the whatever. That basically the truth is so fucked up that they'd lose their role if the truth was known. Well, who makes the decision as an older authority figure to fuck up their life like that? They do. Or do they? Did anyone bother to teach them any of this data in a cult committed to psychological, sexual illiteracy? But if anyone chose it, it was the parent, not the child. It was the priest, not the parishioner. It is the authority figure. And yet if anyone is blamed, oh, the nice Mr. Phillips, he's such a nice man. Did you have to ruin his whole career after all the prayers he did? It's absolutely sick, and it is predictable in a psychologically illiterate cult. Now, this can, just be psychological, or it can be you're no longer part of this family, or you broke your mother's heart. So there's all kinds of different layers of this. I didn't break my wife's heart. You broke your mother's heart for revealing that she married a pedophile. I didn't break her heart. I can't help having sex with my children, but you could stop from telling about it. So you have all kinds of insanity, but it's a normal, predictable layer. If you can't kill the sexual abuse survivor with all of the stupidity so far, let's hit them with this one, because this will really drive them crazy, where it just reminds them that it's all their fault, which is a good reason to kill themselves and drink themselves to death, which many of them do. We can then complain to them for drinking too much, etc., when they're doing exactly what they're asked, going insane and dying to protect the abuser. Next comes the secrecy for those who enable their abusers. Oh, you didn't want to ruin their career, this and that and the other. So you've had a momentous event take place in your life. We've been talking about it all this point. This is a momentous event. It's affected your relationship with a husband, with a future lover. It's affected your feelings. It's affected your identity. It's made you feel unsafe. This is a major event. And it is an event that a cult in a profound state of systemic denial refuses to understand or empathize with. Why are you so cold? Why are you so defensive? Nothing wrong with us. We're an abuse cult, but you should enjoy it. You should get over it. You should be more positive. You should not dwell in the past. Get over it and move on. I don't understand why you're being so negative. So this willful ignorance is just another burden to lay on top of the sexual abuse survivor. Now the secrecy, I guess I'm just fundamentally flawed. It has nothing to do with being raped by my priest repeatedly, then disbelieved by my mother, then told that I was too scared and frigid by my first 3 boyfriends who left me for women who hadn't been raped. It has nothing to do with any of that. No, I guess I'm just a wet blanket for no apparent reason. In other words, when you create a secret about some of the biggest moments in your life, you ensure systemic loneliness because no one can understand you and no one will understand you. And in this cult, no one will find that problematic. Do you realize that there are thousands, literally thousands of things that not a single person on this entire planet knows about me? Thousands. You don't know them. My wife doesn't know them. Why? Why is that okay to have so much systemic ignorance? I write them down in a book. Here, read them. Oh, I'm too busy. It's complicated. Don't know what to think about that. Let me go back to watching video games. Let me play a few movies. I don't need to understand you. You don't need to understand me. When the major events of your life that shape your personality are secret, are taboo, are incomprehensible in a cult that refuses to be literate in these domains, you are alone because neither you nor anyone else understands you, which makes empathy impossible, which makes attunement impossible, which makes adult love zero. Not one person can love you as an adult when your wound is secret. And yet, these abusers, Peter Sandhill, my sexual abuser, the Human Awareness Institute, they couldn't get it out fast enough. We believe it would be better for you and for your abuser if no one ever knew what happened. Just go crazy and get loaded up with all of our cruelty and take the blame. This has nothing to do with us. Take the blame. And off you go. You won't understand it, and no one else will, and you'll never be loved. It'll be our little secret. It's another wave of abuse. Now, if you're abused by a nun or a priest, 5% of Catholic priests, I don't know if it's 5% of nuns, we don't tend to care about sexual abuse from women as much, but 5% of Catholic priests are pedophiles. Do they become priests because they're pedophiles and that's good hunting grounds? Or does the schizophrenia and sociopathic elements in the Catholic Church induce that behavior? Or is telling healthy men that in order to love God, they have to be celibate and become sexually frustrated? Who knows what all the mix is, because of course we would never study that, and the Catholic Church will be the first to keep all that secret from the highest levels of the Vatican. But nonetheless, when you are sexually abused by someone you respect, it correlates, it cross-wires your ideals with abuse. So it's another wave of the love, is abuse thing, where it's very difficult to then be spiritual, if to be spiritual is to commit heresy and abuse. Now, this is particularly sadistic when, my father would read me the stories of, the Old Testament God who would take the father up on the hill and say, "You must sacrifice your only son for the Lord, because I'm a sociopathic, fucked up giant of an older man who wants to know if you're good enough to be part of my gang. So, sacrifice your only son. Cut him in half. You didn't do anything wrong, of course. We're sacrificing innocents and children for the Lord. Up, You were a good gang member, you've passed the test. In fact, your bloodline could be useful to a sociopathic bully like me. So go ahead and keep your son. You've proved your loyalty. You were willing to kill a child. How wonderful. And by the way, if you don't do what I say, I'll burn you alive for all eternity in a lake of fire. And homosexuals, oh, they're terrible. They're unforgivable. But now you're a homosexual. You were just abused by your priest. So am I going to be burned in a lake of fire? Unfortunately. The nuns sexually abusing the women, again, same thing. If your religion is so fucked up that your deity is going to burn you alive for touching the female body or the male body, and you drill that into children with sociopathic teachers that convince you that, if you're one of God's people and you're this fucked up, God must be pretty fucked up. But we'll crosswire that and call it great and call it love. See, now you have sexual abuse that makes you blasphemous, that makes you a heretic in a paradigm of a sociopathic deity that'll burn you alive for eternity for being a heretic. So you just traumatize the shit out of those children and completely confuse what is and isn't spiritual. Well, there's 5% of your Catholic priests, maybe 5% of the nuns, and the Catholics don't have a corner on this. We just haven't gotten around to measuring the other religions. Shamanism, it's no different. Raped, sexually abused women who go down to have shamanic healings. Meaning abuse of power and sexual abuse in spiritual context is a statistical certainty in a psychologically illiterate cult. So it's happening all over the place. We're not just picking on Catholics. But why the hell aren't priests trained in this in all areas? And why isn't the public alerted about this statistic? So you have religious heresy. It's another wave of ignorance and abuse. Then you have abuse of power. This is when a Joe Biden, an up-and-coming Democrat, gets Tara Reade fired and blacklisted for alerting her HR department that she was sexually assaulted by Joe Biden. This is when Stormy Daniels gets a $300,000 legal bill for proving that the President of the United States lies. And this is when Tara Reade and Stormy Daniels get death threats by sociopathic reptiles triggered and trained in an emotionally illiterate cult, and millions of dollars are spent to discredit them, and not one penny is spent for their therapy. That's a reptilian circle, because everyone doesn't want to see their candidate brought down by the truth. Now, why wouldn't presidents sexually abuse people more than most when they've got more power? And that seems to be what powerful people do in our cult, because we don't make powerful people any more emotionally illiterate than anyone else. In many cases, we reward them for being sociopathic and insane. You get a powerful, sociopathic male who's insane, who's been taught that he's supposed to show his masculinity by being sexual, and oh my, look what these powerful people do. But the real wave of abuse that I'm addressing here is, for example, the Human Awareness Institute, when they had a 10-hour recording of my therapist, Peter Sandhill, sexually abusing me under the influence of psychedelics, which he prescribed and elevated. Well, they cut me off all the email lists because we wouldn't want the truth to come out. It's called abuse of power. It's called Joe Biden calling all the people around. You see, and the Democrats funded a lot of the women's sexual abuse resource centers. And so the heads of the department would say, you know, we can't help you recover from sexual abuse from Joe Biden, or the Democrats won't fund us, and we can't help other women. So that's Tara Reade having the sociopathic, abusive Joe Biden destroy her life and simultaneously deny her access to public funds, who depended on the politics of a corrupt Democrat. I mean, we're not picking sides here. Trump is probably worse. But whether it's Clinton or Bush Sr. or Bush Jr., nothing's come out on Obama yet. But, I mean, the odds are not good. It's very, very sad. So you can expect in this cult that if you try and tell the truth and become sane and break out of the umbrella of loneliness, you can expect to be attacked for doing so by people who do not want their cronies or their own status quo disrupted by that corruption, by that truth coming out. It's fine that it happened, but it's not fine that it comes out. Disney was aware of Harvey Weinstein. Disney, a nice family company. Disney was aware of Harvey Weinstein's legal settlements for years. Disney paid for Harvey Weinstein's attorney to set these young girls up to sign non-disclosure contracts that they couldn't get a copy of. Because if they took the non-disclosure contract to the New York Times, that Disney was hiring lawyers to cover a sadistic, pedophile, and repeated sexual offender who was giving them Oscars, then Disney would have to get rid of one of their cash cows and actually follow family values. So Disney's great strategy was, let's have these women sign non-disclosure contracts that they can only see secretly, accompanied by our attorneys, or we'll destroy their lives. And they don't get a copy of their own non-disclosure contract. And we've just buried the story and paid off another victim to make her feel terrible for not coming forward. It's called abuse of power. It's just one more weight to hammer away at the sexual abuse survivor. Then you have the shame of betrayal with this abuse of power, because when you are sexually abused and traumatized again, you tend to regress. Now, what is regression? Well, a sexually and psychologically illiterate cult doesn't know. So you have to then have the burden of the sexual abuse survivor educate the cult on what they don't know again. But the bottom line is, you stop interacting with reality as a grown-up and you start feeling 5 years old. Suddenly all the abuse of power, all the bigness, it's all 10 times more overwhelming, it's all 10 times more traumatic. But you're around emotionally illiterate people who don't understand regression or how certain it is when you load. I mean, if we were so dumb that we could load 3 pallets of bricks on a Chevette and then be shocked when the transmission went out in the first mile, if we were that dumb, we'd do something about it. Come on, learn a little mechanics. But we are this dumb when it comes to psychology. But rather than do something about it, we shame people for talking about feminine topics because we're too dumb to know that chauvinism doesn't work. It's unscientific. The data does not support chauvinism. I mean, even the most basic math that a materialist could do. How can you make an equation that the golden goose is less valuable than the golden egg that it produces? Can you figure that out? Can you come up with an equation why it's more valuable to own one golden egg than the golden goose that lays golden eggs? Can you figure that out? I'd like to see your math. Because it's moronic. It doesn't hold up. If the egg is valuable, then that which produces the egg is more valuable. That's science. That's mathematics. It's like saying the number 6 can give birth to 3 number 2s. That makes sense. The number 6 can never give birth to a billion, and 2 cannot be more valuable than 6. That's mathematics. But a chauvinistic ignoramus, it's a wonderful term from the biography of Henry Ford. It's a great biography of Henry Ford Sr., hiring wonderful people to advise him and this and that, and leaving school early to start the Ford Motor Company. Anyway, if men are so important, then the women who give birth to them are more important. How about that for math? We're not a scientific cult. We are a dogmatic, shame-based, ignorant cult that likes to pretend it's scientific to mask its dogma, to mask its ignorance. So you have the shame of betrayal, which is, your whole culture and world not helping you in general, making it worse. You have the regression that occurs to where you feel very small. That's another wave of abuse. And then you have nobody understands that you're feeling 2 years old, which is another wave of abuse. Then you have being shamed for behaving like a regressed person, which is another wave of abuse. And then because everyone's abusing you and you don't want to fight with them all when you're in a regressed, traumatized state, you go along with them and blame yourself, I'm such an idiot. When you're surrounded by idiots who are too idiotic to know that they're idiotic. But I'll blame myself, another wave of abuse. And then in most cases, sexual abuse is not recorded, so you have a final wave of insanity, etc., which is the abuser pretends it never happened and suggests there's something wrong with you that you think it did. And then you have the next wave of abuse that because the abuser is generally speaking higher rank in the cult than the victim, because abusers are cowards. They don't pick the defense attorney or the president of the United States and sexually abuse them. They don't rape Secret Service members. No, they pick some little 6-year-old kid who doesn't know how to defend himself. Because in a sociopathic environment, like look at Trump and his abuse. Let's say that Trump complained to one of the secretaries about how his dad was mean with him. Well, the secretary, this is a 5-year-old kid. You can't get me fired. But if I confront your dad on your behalf, I'll lose my secretarial job. And so you have abuse happening in plain sight all across the country, where the victim is low-ranking and the perpetrator is high-ranking. And you have witnesses all across the country. There goes Harvey Weinstein again with another rape victim. It's not going to end up well for her, but we're not going to jeopardize the deal because she can go down and Harvey Weinstein could get us an Oscar. There goes President Clinton again. Softly young girl this time. There goes Jeffrey Epstein. There goes Bill's father. Isn't he having an affair with an awfully young person? Wasn't she raped before? We're not going to get into it because we don't want to confront an authority figure who's going to attack us and take revenge for bringing this up. We don't want to deal with that. It's a pity. But predators generally choose the most vulnerable people because they're coming out of the reptilian brain. And if you're coming out of the reptilian brain and you're a crocodile, you don't pick someone stronger than yourself. You pick someone weaker than yourself. And that's the way it works. It's a pity. But a lot of the most vicious abuse occurs from the highest person, the parent, to the 5-year-old, to the 12-year-old, and the abuse eases off. You know, you're raped at 7 years old, and by maybe 11, 12, maybe you'll start telling your girlfriend, so it stops. You have more power now. So the abuse stops, and then it transitions to someone else who's smaller. Now, of course, who's able to deal with this? I didn't know how to deal with this. So there's a new level of trauma. I'm now overwhelmed with all these things that I'm getting glimpses of, and I don't know how to deal with it. Because you don't know how to deal with it, and I need help. You see, you don't know how to deal with it either. Well, if you don't know how to deal with it, how does the person weighed down with all these loads deal with it? And the abuser obviously doesn't know how to deal with it, or they wouldn't abuse. And they didn't know how to deal with it when they were young either, or they wouldn't have become infected. So this is the self-perpetuating wheel, the circle. The abuser doesn't know how to deal with it. The witness doesn't know how to deal with it. The victim doesn't know how to deal with it, certainly. And the abuser doesn't know how to deal with it. And it just goes round and round and round. And we, as a cult, will spend 6 hours a day on our phone for the next dozens of years, playing video games, watching mindless factoids and YouTubes, getting dopamine hits, pretending we do not have the time to learn. These are a few of the main layers of abuse that a typical sexual abuse survivor, I mean, if you're married to someone who sexually abuses you, if someone you abuse is famous and can, like Harvey Weinstein, hire Israeli security service to track down women, or Jeffrey Epstein hire detectives, etc., or the Church of Scientology hire 5 or 6 detectives at $10,000 a week just to hunt one person and harass them, well, then it gets to a whole new scale. How you feel completely and utterly helpless, which makes it harder to heal the regression, which makes it harder to heal the depression, which makes it more likely to commit suicide, which is exactly what an uncomfortable cult and the abuser wants. Oh, thank heavens, they killed themselves. and I don't have to take any responsibility, and nobody will know, and I don't have to pay detectives at $10,000 a week anymore. They did me the ultimate favor. Now I can go on to my next victim. This is the weight we currently deal and give to survivors. Anyone who gives this weight to a victim, a survivor, is insane, sociopathic, cruel, unkind, whatever you want to call it. It's not human. And that facilitates the migration down into the reptilian brain, which is one of the vehicles through which the victim becomes the perpetrator. Because once you're a reptile, in order to escape the overwhelming pain of the empathic brain, who was betrayed with so much cruelty, once you've escaped into the reptilian domain, you can now do to another helpless person exactly what was done to you and feel absolutely nothing, maybe even feel a little better because you're not so alone anymore. And now we've created another perpetrator. And in our cult, we love a scapegoat. We don't want to look at systemic change. Because the obvious place to change this would be in our kindergartens, middle school, and high school. We're already paying all those teachers. Why not require the teachers to be sexually traumatically literate and actually teach the children in kindergarten? And this is how you respond to a child who's been sexually abused. Let's rank your response based on the abuser. This is what it means to be a human being with empathy. We could do that. But that's not usually where we go as a scapegoating cult. First, we try and shut up the victim and attack them. And okay, fine, they're still talking about it. Let's try and settle it with a nice NDA. We'll pay them off so that we can remain traumatically illiterate as a cult and pretend everything's wonderful. But if that doesn't work, then we turn our full hate onto the perpetrator. You're the one that made this person talk so much that's interrupting my TV show and potato chips. Then we attack the victim. Then we pay large sums of money to lock up the perpetrator. It's insane. But we don't require parents to read a book before becoming parents. It's a novel idea, parental literacy. You actually have to understand the statistics of what your child is going to go through in this cult and be able to know how to respond to them and know how risky you are as a parent. It's not too odd. We're just not doing it. There's nothing stopping any of us from spending 30 hours to read The Body Keeps the Score, to watch The Vow, to watch Holy Hell, to watch any of my videos. There's nothing stopping us. It's, do we love ourselves enough to care? Do we care enough to see? Do we see enough to understand? Do we understand enough to empathize? Do we empathize enough to attune? Do we attune enough to succeed? Gather feedback. Is it working? Is it not working? Do we succeed enough to facilitate the survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, development of gifts, bringing those gifts into the world, and becoming part of something bigger than ourselves? Do we love ourselves enough to do that? To grow up, to become an adult? And do we love another enough to love them enough to care? Care enough to take time enough to see, to facilitate the viral spread of adulthood? Because the most loving thing we can do for ourselves once we love ourselves is to help another human being love themselves and become an adult. Mathematically speaking, the virus of adult love is the most potent, intelligent, human, effective, sustainable virus that the human operating system can run. It generates sustainable ecology, healthy families, healthy cultures. And you can go cradle to grave in our cult without even learning the definition of love, let alone being measured or measuring yourself on how much you love yourself and how much you love others through those objective metrics. Welcome to a possible world of adult love. The first step is caring enough to take time and taking enough time to see. The first step is stepping out of ignorance.